Welcome to another episode of The Darkest Job in History. On Life Facts Daily, we will be having insight on life of the medieval executioner, the outcast behind the blade. Imagine a job so feared, so despised, that even your children were branded with shame. A job that brought wealth, power, and influence, but also exile, hatred, and danger. This was the life of the medieval executioner, the man who delivered justice with an axe, a rope, or fire. For many in the Middle Ages, death was entertainment. Public executions weren't hidden away behind prison walls. They were staged like theater, performed in the very heart of town squares. Merchants sold roasted meats, wine, and sweet cakes to the crowds. Children sat on their parents' shoulders to see better. It was part justice, part festival, and part horror show. But while the crowds jeered at the condemned, they often saved their deepest hatred for one man, the executioner. His face was known to everyone, yet he was treated like a disease. Villagers crossed the street to avoid him. Priests refused him entry church. Markets turned his family away. His house stood on the outskirts of town, a physical reminder of his social exile. So why would anyone take this job? The answer was complicated. Some executioners were born into it, the sons of men who had already been shunned. Others were forced into the role as punishment, given no choice but to serve. And a few took it willingly, because if you were skilled, it paid better than most professions of the time. But the price of that money was steep. Every day, you walked a razor's edge between respect and ruin. One man who lived this life in vivid detail was Franz Schmidt, executioner of Nuremberg. Over 4 decades, he executed hundreds of criminals, tortured countless others, and meticulously documented it all in a diary that survives to this day. His story gives us the most complete picture of what it meant to live and die as a man behind the blade, causing blood and spectacles. Picture Nuremberg in 1617. The church bells ring, echoing through cobblestone streets. The square fills with thousands of people, merchants, nobles, beggars, and children. They aren't here for a sermon or a parade. They're here to watch George Karl Lambrecht, a 30-year-old counterfeiter, pay for his crimes. Rumors swirl that Lambrecht dabbled in black magic. His ex-wife, feared as a witch called the Iron Biter, was whispered to seduce men with sorcery. The crowd craves not just justice, but spectacle. They want to see evil burned from the world. Lambrecht begs for the axe, a quick, clean death, but counterfeiting carries the sentence of burning. His pleas fall on deaf ears. Shackled, pale, trembling, he is dragged toward the execution ground. Behind him walks Franz Schmidt, silent, carrying the tools of death. This was the life of a medieval executioner. He did not lead the parade of power. That place belonged to judges, priests, and city officials. He followed behind, a necessary shadow, a man with no honor in the eyes of society. The irony was cruel. Without him, justice could not be delivered. Yet with him, justice became terrifying. The crowd demanded blood, but they demanded it cleanly. A single botched stroke of the axe could spark a riot. Angry mobs had torn executioners limb from limb for less. Franz knew this better than anyone. That's why he practiced endlessly, chopping melons, logs, and animal carcasses until his strikes were precise. He achieved a staggering 98% success rate, a level of perfection that probably saved his life countless times. A life of fear and duty, executioners weren't simply killers. They were also torturers, interrogators, and punishers. Schmidt's diary describes crushing bones with iron rods, tearing flesh with pincers, and branding criminals' faces with hot irons. For lesser crimes, he flogged offenders, cut off ears, or even removed fingers. He was the hand of the law, delivering pain as well as death. And yet, strangely, he was also a healer, outcast from society, but still trusted for his knowledge of herbs and anatomy. Schmidt treated injuries and illnesses when others would not. Villagers sought his help in secret, though they would never invite him into their homes. The contradiction of his life is striking. He was both feared and needed, hated and respected. The city could not function without him. yet he was forced to live apart from it. His wife and children bore the same shame, marked forever by his profession. Other executioners across Europe shared similar fates. In England, Jack Ketch became infamous for his botched beheadings. His name grew so tied to cruelty that Ketch became slang for the executioner's block. In France, mobs rioted when executions went wrong. And everywhere, executioners walked a fine line between survival and disgrace. Still, the work paid well. Franz earned more than most teachers and craftsmen of his time. His skills eventually bought him land and security. For all the horror, he left his children wealthier than most, though they still carried the stain of his profession. From horror to history. As Europe modernized, the spectacle of death began to fade. Families grew disgusted at rotting bodies left in gibbets. Crowds began to see execution not as entertainment, but as barbarism. By the 19th century, hangings and beheadings moved behind prison walls. The profession of the public executioner slowly disappeared. Yet, in England, men like James Barry still carried out executions as late as the late 1800s. Barry introduced the long drop method of hanging, designed to kill instantly rather than strangle. Unlike Franz Schmidt, Barry didn't see his job as shameful. He was paid well, treated with a measure of respect, and eventually wrote about his career. Barry's story shows the strange duality of executioners. Some were hated, others were treated like celebrities. Some became symbols of barbarism, others reformers who tried to make death less cruel. But all of them carried the same burden, the knowledge that their hands held the power of life and death. The last executioners. Today, executioners no longer stand in the public eye. In the United States, where the death penalty remains, the identities of those who administer lethal injections are kept secret. In firing squads, no one knows which gun fired the fatal shot. Jack Ketch, England's most hated executioner, 1600s. Jack Ketch is the most infamous executioner in English history, not because of skill, but because of failure. In 1685, during the execution of James Scott, Duke of Monmouth, Ketch struck again and again, hacking at the nobleman's neck like a butcher on raw meat. Witnesses said it took 5 blows before Monmouth finally died. The crowd erupted in rage, almost lynching Ketch on the spot. His name became so synonymous with cruelty and incompetence that in England, Ketch became slang for executioner itself. Charles-Henri Sanson, the guillotine master of France, 1700s, 1800s. Sanson's family served as executioners for 6 generations, but Charles-Henri became infamous during the French Revolution. From 1789 to 1793, he executed nearly 3,000 people, including King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. Eyewitnesses said he hesitated before beheading the king, whispering a prayer before pulling the rope. He confessed later that the endless bloodshed haunted him, and though he believed the guillotine was humane, it turned him into a symbol of the revolution's darkest years. Giovanni Bugatti, the papal executioner, 1796 to 1864. Known as Mastro Titta, Bugatti served as the official executioner of the Papal States for nearly 70 years. He carried out 516 executions, usually by beheading or garroting. Strangely, when not killing, he worked as an umbrella painter. Locals both feared and respected him. Children were warned never to cross his path. Bugatti was so methodical that his red cloak became infamous in Rome. And when he finally retired, he was honored by the Pope with a pension. Rare respect for an executioner. James Barry, England's last public hangman, 1800s. Barry executed 131 people during his career. He's remembered for introducing the long drop, hanging method, designed to break the neck instantly instead of slowly strangling the victim. But things didn't always go to plan. In one notorious case, Barry miscalculated the drop, and the prisoner was decapitated in front of a horrified crowd. He later wrote memoirs describing the guilt, nightmares, and pressure of his profession, giving us one of the clearest insights into the psychological toll of the job. Giovanni Battista Bugatti's successors and the Italian legacy. After Bugatti, his successors continued executions in Italy, but with declining public appetite. Many townspeople began protesting against spectacles, forcing hangings to move behind prison walls. Some executioners, stripped of their role, became beggars or vagabonds, unable to escape the stigma of their profession. Charles-Henri Sanson, the last executioner of Thailand, 1980s, 2000s. Charles-Henri carried out 55 executions by machine gun in Bangkok, standing just feet away as he fired volleys into the condemned's hearts. Later in life, he wrote a book called The Last Executioner, reflecting that while he was Buddhist and believed in karma, he had no regrets. To him, it was duty. He was helping society stay safe. His story later inspired a movie, making him one of the few executioners to become a cultural figure. Underscore. Albert Pierrepoint, Britain's most efficient executioner, 1905 to 1956. Pierrepoint is perhaps the most famous modern executioner, credited with hanging over 400 people, including Nazi war criminals after World War II. He prided himself on efficiency and speed. Sometimes the condemned were dead within 7 seconds of entering the chamber. Yet later in life, Pierrepoint wrote that executions never solved crime and never truly brought peace to victims' families. His memoir became a striking anti-death penalty statement from the very man who carried it out. In Saudi Arabia, executioners like Mohammed Saad al-Beshi once averaged 7 beheadings a day, openly speaking about their work. In Singapore, Darshan Singh executed hundreds, sometimes dozens in a single day, before retiring in 2005. In Thailand, Charles-Henri Sanson carried out 55 executions by firing squad, later reflecting on his karma with little regret. These men may be among the last of a dying breed. The era of public executioners, hated, feared, and infamous, is long gone in most of the world. But their legacy remains etched into history and folklore. Franz Schmidt's diary still survives, a haunting record of the life of a man who spent 40 years as both healer and executioner. His words remind us that behind every blade, behind every sentence of death, was a man condemned in his own way, condemned to live as the outcast who carried society's darkest burden. When we picture history, we think of kings, queens, and warriors. But hidden in the shadows stood another figure, feared, despised, yet essential, the executioner. The medieval executioner lived a life of contradictions. He was paid well, yet treated like a leper. Without him, justice could not exist, yet his very presence was a stain on society. Crowds demanded blood, but cursed the man who delivered it. Priests denied him absolution, neighbors avoided his family, and his children inherited the same shame. Franz Schmidt of Nuremberg gives us the clearest window into this world. For 40 years, he executed hundreds and tortured countless others, recording every detail in his diary. He practiced obsessively to ensure clean beheadings. A single mistake could spark a riot. His precision earned him wealth and survival, but never true acceptance. Other executioners became infamous. Jack Ketch in England botched beheadings so badly his name became a byword for cruelty. Charles-Henri Sanson presided over the guillotine during the French Revolution, haunted by the thousands he killed. James Barry in 19th century England introduced the long drop to make death quicker, believing in progress, but admitting that nightmares followed him long after. Executioners were both feared and strangely revered. People whispered they had supernatural powers. Ropes from hangings were sold as charms. Body parts of the condemned were believed to carry magic. In this twisted economy, executioners were both killers and suppliers of relics. By the 19th century, the spectacle faded. Executions moved behind prison walls. Today, executioners remain anonymous. In the U.S., No one knows who pushes the plunger in a lethal injection or which soldier's bullet kills in a firing squad. Yet the legacy endures. The executioner embodies our darkest fascination, the line between justice and cruelty. He was not a hero, nor entirely a villain, but a man condemned by duty to live as society's outcast. The blade is silent now, but the shadow remains, a reminder that civilization was built not just by kings and generals, but by men who carried the burden of death so that others could call themselves civilized. These stories show how executioners were never just faceless killers. They were products of their time, shaped by law, religion, politics, and fear. Some were cruel, some compassionate, some professional, and some haunted. But all lived under the same shadow, respected in secret, hated in public, and remembered as grim figures who carried the weight of justice on their shoulders. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like our channel. Life Facts Daily.